Hi, my name is Crossman Sullivan, and I want to welcome you as we join together to learn how to love more. That is, how do we put love into action? How do we become love-driven leaders? In this first of a three-part series on the judicial system, we'll talk with three judges, a public safety consultant, and two-time former police chief on how to combat racism in the judicial system. This discussion is apolitical, nonpartisan, and this discussion is also just a start. It is hopefully a spark where you and I and all of us within the judicial system and within our communities will continue to work together to provide equality and equal access for all. Let's work on healing. Let's work on combating racism. Let's listen. Let's love more. I want to welcome you all. Thank you for joining us for this incredible, special, pivotal, challenging event. We are here in what we are calling a bridge to justice. We are here to talk about ways to bring change to combat racism within the judicial system. In order to do so, as not just myself, I am Crossman Sullivan. I am an attorney, a motivational speaker, an advocate, and an author. And I am joined today to talk about leading in love, putting love in action with some incredible esteemed colleagues. First and foremost, we have Judge Rachelle Carnesale. She is a Superior Court judge of Fulton County, Georgia. She is currently running for re-election with the vote on June 9th. Judge Carnesale, if you'd give a quick wave so folks know who you are. Next, we have Fani. She is a former chief judge in the city of South Fulton. She is also a candidate for Fulton County District Attorney, with that election also being June 9th. Fani Willis, please say hello.
Hi.
Then we have Judge Kellie Hill, a magistrate court judge in Cobb County, Georgia. She's a candidate for Cobb County Superior Court, also the election occurring on June 9th. Judge Hill, we are so grateful to have you.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm happy to be here.
And finally, we have Dr. Cedric L. Alexander, public safety consultant, former public safety director in DeKalb County, two-time police chief in Rochester, New York, in DeKalb County, Georgia. He is also author of the book, not just a book, the book. And I want to get this right, Dr. Alexander. The book is titled In Defense of Public Service, How 22 Million Workers Will Save Our Republic. Dr. Alexander, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It is a joy to have all of you here. Dr. Alexander, because as I said, you have written the book. You have been the go-to expert and continue to be in going into communities like Ferguson and other areas of crisis and in talking as an expert on CNN and other areas and what we are dealing with right now. Dr. Alexander, how do we heal? How do we make this judicial process from police to prosecutors to judges to victims and defendants? How do we make this better? How do we go forward and combat racism?
Well, the racism issue, now that's a huge question, but in terms of where we are right now, and at this very moment in time, I have to think about this as a culmination of events that led up to the death of George Floyd. And here's why I get this little backdrop, because we know historically in this country, racism has persisted. It is still here. And what we're seeing now that's being demonstrated in this country and even around the world is that people are pushing back on it, particularly as it relates to criminal justice in this country. And so if we go back and we look at the Arbery case 4 weeks ago in Georgia, and we all saw that horrific event and what that represents for many people of color in this community from a historical context, two white men running behind him in a pickup truck, running him down and killing him. And as if that wasn't enough, a week later, you have Breonna Taylor in Louisville, Kentucky. On a no-knock warrant, police officers come in and shoot and kill her on a warrant that really never should have been written or signed by a judge. And then thirdly, as if that wasn't enough, you have a white female in Central Park who weaponized her white femaleness based on history, i.e. Emmett Till and other cases as such, where she jumps on the phone. Millions of us are looking at it and begging police, I have a black man threatening me. And if that wasn't enough, then on May 25th, we see a murder take place right in front of us in this country and around the world. That was the tipping point among many other tipping points we certainly have seen over time. But what we see out there is a demonstration in this community, in this country today, is a failure in public safety, a failure in the criminal justice system. And I'm gonna be perfectly honest with you. Many prosecutors' offices across this country are becoming into questioning and around. You take the case there in South Georgia, where they totally would have swept that case up under the rug had that video not emerged. But that video really did not need to emerge for there to have been an investigation by the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. And when they did come in 74 days later, they effected 2 arrests in 36 hours. What does that say about a citizen in any community, that community, many communities across this country? What does that say about those prosecutors' offices who appear to be appear to have these incestuous relationships with law enforcement? Many people see them as being part of the same fraternity, if you will. And in there, once you lose legitimacy, and that's exactly what our criminal justice system is losing, it's legitimacy, a lack of trust, a lack of confidence in you. And they may give me a badge, a gun, the authority to effect arrests. But if people on the street don't see me as being legitimate, then I'm going to be ineffective and my job becomes harder. If the people in the country don't see the court systems, the defense attorney offices, the prosecutor offices, if they don't see them as being legitimate, then you're not going to be able to serve people in the way in which we should. So there is a realness and there's perception, but perception is real. And I can tell you, after 40 years of being in the profession and working in a number of agencies across this country, both at local, state, and federal level, we have a lot of inconsistencies in our criminal justice system. And what we're seeing acting out on these streets, even the violence, are people who are sick and tired of being sick and tired. So when you ask me the question, how are we going to fix this? I don't know, because we've damaged it so hard. We've asked young Black men, when you stop by the police, put your hands up, cooperate, comply, do all the things that they're asking you to do. But yet and still, you're being hung in the middle of the street as America watch in broad daylight, and a police officer who acts with so cavalier, as if this is no significance, it's just another day at the office. And 3 complicit partners, and we watched it. All of us watched it. And that's where we are. So
and it's not the first time, and I apologize. I did not mean to interrupt you. I want to affirm what you are saying, and everything you said is not only so powerful and palpable. I want to also talk about your truth in saying the fact that you just don't know. Let me turn, if I can, to Fani Willis. And Fani, you have kindly and lovingly allowed me to call you Fani. You have held such prestigious positions, and we've got 2 judges here. You and I know that the judges cannot talk about open, active cases, but you and Dr. Alexander can. He powerfully said so many things, 2 of which I want to highlight, one of which is referencing Emmett Till. We've got a history of racism, and it's not just Emmett Till, it's 400 years of fatigue and pain. We've got the fact that he so powerfully said, I don't know, and what you and I, Fani, have said to witnesses time and again when you get on the witness stand, it is okay, it is powerful, it is important to say, I don't know when you don't have the answer. Fani, I ask you, how do we go forward? How do we help heal in the justice system when we have these honest answers of, we don't know, and we've got 400 years. We've got Emmett Till's sign that just had to be redone in the last year because of bullets being pierced on that sign to honor his murder. We act like racism didn't occur. It's still going on. Speak to us, Fani.
Well, I mean, I agree with what the doctor has said. but I think that we are at a point where we must get to solutions, but the solutions are not easy solutions. The first thing I think we need is some transparency. It's kind of like when someone has a drug addiction. If you have a drug addiction, you have to admit you have a problem. And the country and the judicial system is going to have to admit there is a problem. As you know, I am running to be the district attorney of Fulton County. I think that one thing that Fulton, which is the biggest county in the state of Georgia, has failed to do, and other district attorneys' offices around the state have done, is we have to recognize that the people have inherent biases, all of us. So the first thing you have to wake up and do is say, I have inherent biases. There are all kinds of studies that I'm sure the doctor will attest to, that a 12-year-old young African-American boy and a 12-year-old white male, the white male will be perceived as a child and the black male will be perceived already as an adult. And that is true for young ladies as well. They are perceived older. Why is that important? It's important because then you don't see them as a child, and then when they're in the judicial system, you don't treat them as children. One of the things that I plan to do on day one as a solution is training for my staff, training about just the way they look at a file, the way they look at a case, and more importantly, the way that they look at the human beings. Is that victim as much of a victim to you if they live in an apartment, if they're not very wealthy, and if they are African American? The same way you look at a victim that is in maybe the north part of the county that is Caucasian and they have lots of money. And if they aren't the same to you, if they are not equal to you as victims, if you don't think your job is as important, you have to ask yourself why. The response of the country, I don't agree with the looting, but I think that the prosecutors in that case in Minneapolis, they brought this on. In some part, even maybe more so than the officer that did this vile, evil, disgusting act. When the prosecutor got in front of the world and said, I don't know if we have charges here.
That set it off.
That's when people started setting stuff on fire. What are you talking about? Now, me, you, everyone on this panel except the doctor has been a prosecutor. There's malice in that video. Absolutely. There is malice in 8 minutes and 46 seconds. What are you talking about? You don't know if there is a crime there. The prosecutor could have restored the faith in the community if just from day one, he said to the community, oh, I saw the video and we're bringing charges against everyone involved. But I need y'all to be patient with me because I need to figure out the right charges and how many charges. That would have changed the tone of the entire country.
Yes. Notice the difference in your I don't know. There's a difference in I need time to get the specific charges versus I don't know if I see anything. Dangerous, damaging, and we've got to be brave enough to speak truths as current prosecutors, former prosecutors. Judge Hill, jump in here again to Fani Willis's powerful words. We know as former prosecutors that even though we took that job on humbly and reverently, none of us were fully trained for the power that came to it. It was lots of on-the-job training. You may be aware that former President Barack Obama, in a statement brought forth in all of this most recent pain, has argued that we perceive that the power is all at the federal level, and he contends the greatest power is at the state and local level in that judicial system. Talk to us, Judge Hill, about how we bring change if that is where the most powerful change can happen.
Thank you, Sarah. You are right. Many people focus on what's happening in Washington. And yes, that is important. But I will tell you, your local elected officials will affect your daily lives. Your judges, your prosecutors, your police chiefs, your sheriffs. These are the individuals, your legislators. These are the folks who will set policy. And these are the folks who will execute the laws and implement the laws and apply the laws. And we talked through Dr. Alexander about the public safety feature and how they have missed the mark.
Fani talked about the justice system. What I want to talk about is the individual. And I want to talk about the individual because it is the individual who has to step up and actually help affect change. How do you affect change? We've already talked about it, but I'm going to reiterate it. We affect change by acknowledging the fact that there is a problem. For so long, we have acted as though racism does not exist. We have to be honest with ourselves. We have to say, racism exists. In addition to racism, as Fani pointed out, bias absolutely does exist on everyone's part. We all have biases, depending on our own experiences, our own backgrounds, our own perspectives. They are plagued with biases. And we have to acknowledge these things. We have to be aware of them. If we're not aware of them, we can't change them. So those are the things that we have to do. Fani talked about training. When I am elected to Superior Court, in Cobb County, it will be a historical election. Either way, Cobb County will get its first African-American Superior Court judge. We have a fine bench in Cobb County, but I will tell you, when elected, I will be the only one with my perspective, just by virtue of who I am. And by virtue of the fact that I have an African-American son who is 20 years old, who I know is perceived as a threat every time he walks down the street. So if I can take my voice and help educate the bench, who will be making decisions on other cases, if they can see things from my perspective, hopefully it will have an effect on maybe the way judges can see and hear facts of cases. So the first thing is to acknowledge the problem and then focus on it and hopefully deal with it through training as well as self-realization. And we have to utilize our voices. I see you want to say something, Sarah.
Well, I don't want it lost. I want our listeners to understand, because Cobb County is not unique, but if you are living in a jurisdiction in which you have leaders of any kind whatsoever, in your church, in your school, anywhere, and we do not have diversity, that has to be talked about. It's 2020. What are we doing? Of course we want competent people, but there is an inherent problem if we aren't having the depth and breadth of who we are. So Judge Hill, I thank you for your truth. I thank you for your bravery. And I want to keep talking about this acknowledgement that you and Fani and Dr. Alexander keep hitting on and speaking to this truth. Judge Carnesale, if we can tie into this theme, and thank you for being here. You are currently on a Superior Court bench, and I want to ask you about a pain point that I was heard today and talking with so many people who are aching. All of us to various degrees are aching, but deep within the Black community, and please echo me, tell me I'm wrong, but there is fatigue. There is enough, tired, no more. And so, Judge Carnesale, one of the things that was echoed to me is a deep concern on the bench of how do we ensure that there is a equal playbook, that people coming before the court, no matter their background, are treated equally. In this time of COVID, we know inherently that there's been disparity in our healthcare system, which has led to further disparity in education. But those disparities were in existence before COVID. Talk to us about how we in the judicial system hold each other accountable so we're all on the same playbook, that old church song, we're reading from the same hymnal, however you want to describe it. Tell us about justice, Judge Carnesale.
You know, in Fulton County, we are blessed with a very diverse bench, and to some extent, we do keep each other honest. We meet with regularity, and we talk about some of the big issues. And some of the more experienced and seasoned judges even have supported our very young bench. About half of our bench has less than 5 years experience, and 6 of us have under 3 years experience. So some of the more seasoned judges have taken it upon themselves to mentor the younger judges and help us through some of these more difficult issues. That said, it's critically important for the public to understand that judges have the opportunity to ferret out issues of unfairness and bias and prejudice in our system. Every time we hear a motion to suppress, every time we hear about a questionable stop, that's another opportunity for a judge to look at the circumstances and determine whether it's a fair and legitimate process or whether there is bias and prejudice at play. So training for judges is also just critically important. I also have the advantage of having worked in this system for almost 30 years now. So I was a career prosecutor and also worked in child welfare. So I've dealt with some of the families in our state who are just living at the margins and can't get ahead and can't catch a break from the government. And daily, I see people coming before me, pre-COVID, of course, for guilty pleas or motions, criminal defendants who are shocked at a court that will take the time to find out what their story is, or will listen to all the evidence without ruling. And I think a system that doesn't have the faith of the people participating in it, a system that doesn't have the faith of the community, is a system that is destined to fail. So as judges, we have to remember that our customers are the defendants and the victims who come before us. Our customers are the jurors who come to court and need to see engaged jurists who are focused on the issues at hand and who have appropriate lenses. And the beginning of that, I think, is exactly just echoing what the other speakers have said today, and that is we need to be acquainted with our own lenses, how we see the world. I have a number of lenses, and I realize when I'm putting a different lens on. Besides my background in prosecution, I'm a special needs parent, and I find that I'm frequently using that lens in court to talk to people who are disenfranchised, undereducated, or have learning disabilities. So I think you need to be in tune enough with yourself to understand what your different lenses are and ferret out the inappropriate ones and apply the ones that are helpful in a situation so that defendants and citizens and jurors can see that our system is a legitimate system, because otherwise it will fail.
Yes, yes. And Dr. Alexander, to follow up on that, how then do we best protect officers, but also train them to understand the story, to understand the life that they are dealing with? When we look at what is happening in these riots, just as of late, we have some officers who are kneeling with the protesters. We have some sheriffs who are walking beside them. We have a few officers who are continuing the pain. I am not saying all, but I'm saying a few. How do we protect and train and, dare I say, love?
Well, let me say this. You do have a lot of good officers out there. There are a number of good officers out there. Unfortunately, like in any profession, someone do something wrong or out of the way, everyone get painted with the same brush. It comes with the territory, quite frankly. But here's the issue for me, for someone who has managed two major police departments in this country. It's really not about training. It's who we recruit. What's the personality of people that we're recruiting? If we recruit people who don't have a sense of humanity, people who don't have respect for other people, people who don't have a moral compass about themselves, and we bring them into any organization, whether it's policing, whether it's law, whether they're a judge, whether they're a doctor or whatever, you're going to have a bad situation. Those 4 men out there in Minneapolis were 4 men who were totally absent of any moral compass. That was clear. That was evident. That's what they did in daylight. Imagine what they do when there's no cameras around, under the cloak of darkness. It spoke to them, but it spoke to a bigger issue for me with Minneapolis. It spoke to a larger system inside that organization, which very well may have some real systemic racist issues, racial issues. That's what it tells me about Minneapolis. But Minneapolis is not the only department. There are many departments out there that need to take a self-assessment inside their organizations to make sure from the top of that organization to the last person fired, what's your attitude about people? Me as a chief, I set the tone of that organization. There are a lot of well-meaning chiefs that are out there. Well-meaning is not going to get us where we need to go. What we're going to do is have to be well-meaning. We have to role model. We have to hold our people accountable from the assistant chiefs right on down. And when your command staff are not carrying out your orders, your role modeling, your attitude, your expectations, then you have to get rid of them immediately. Because what the problem is that, yes, we have a lot of good officers, but we have bad officers that are surviving in those environments with good officers, which creates a real problem, which means to me there's a cultural issue inside that covers and protect or ignore those bad officers. I would guarantee you, where you find one or two bad ones, you're going to find a culture that sustains those types of attitudes and behaviors. So therefore, the entire system need to be assessed and need to be changed. So it's just not about training, because I can't train you to have a moral compass. I can't train you to be humanistic and have concern and compassion and love for people. If you didn't grow up with that, then you're going to be absent of it, because you're not going to get it in the police academy anywhere. And you're right. I think one of the judges leaned to the fact of, spoke momentarily to the fact of bias. Yes, we all have biases against persons, places, and things. And I spend a lot of my time right now as a consulting actually doing bias training, implicit and explicit bias training. But the training is not going to be of any significance if the leadership in those organizations tell their men and women, this is not about checking a box that you've done the training, but the training now has to be employed and has to become part of that system, that environment where we check and balance each other.
You're so right and wise. It is not just within police structures and judges hiring people for their courtroom. It's about all of us in what we do.